Week 7 getting going. We've got some takeaways from what we've seen in the NFC West and around the league as we await 49ers Vikings Monday Night Football. Keys to victory, what the Niners have to do to beat the Vikes in prime time. And Christian McCaffrey reportedly a slight tear in his oblique. Should the 49ers hold him out? Debo update, all that and more coming up right now.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Big ups to all the everydayers out there. We appreciate you. We love you. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. And of course, welcome to all the newest listeners here to Locked On 49ers. We're with you every day, breaking things down, getting ready for the Monday Nighter. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On and the NFL. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. The big news of the day, Croc, is more specifics about the injuries for not only Christian McCaffrey, but Debo and Trent Williams going into Monday Night Football. We'll know even more, I think, about Trent and Christian McCaffrey Monday. But as of now, and reports from Jay Glazer, it doesn't look great for Christian McCaffrey. He was asked at practice this week. He went back to practice, Croc, and reporter said, "Hey, how you feeling?" He said, "I feel great." And then a little nugget dropped by Jay Glazer. McCaffrey dealing with a slight little tear in his oblique, but expected to play Monday Night Football against the Minnesota Vikings. And a slight tear doesn't make me feel great about his injury and playing through it and the potential for further injury for Christian McCaffrey. A little bit of an extra, one extra day to get ready here because it is Monday Nighter coming off a Sunday game last week. But the question I pose to you, Croc, is philosophical in nature, I think. Christian McCaffrey says he can go. If the doctors said it's up to him, he says, yeah. Should the 49ers hold him out and save him from himself with a slight tear of his oblique this Monday night?
I am no doctor, and maybe we should get my girl, Coach Desi, on because she'll know the specifics of it. But in my opinion, if it can't get worse and he says he can play, then you play him. If it's something that, again, if it goes from a slight tear, which, just a pain management thing, to it's a full tear, and now you really can't play, or now you have to miss several weeks, then that's when there is more of an issue. So how long does a slight tear last in the sense of, the recovery timetable on that? Is that like a 1 or 2 week type thing? But then a full tear is a month or two. If that's the case, I say sit him out, let him rest. If it can't get worse, then, and he can manage the pain, then let's go. Let's ride. Let's play.
It is a slight tear just kind of like a strain? Is it like hearing a slight tear makes me think it's the beginning of a larger tear, which makes me like earlier on in the week, I thought, he's got a muscle strain. It's a pain issue. If he can handle it, he can play. Saw him back in practice. Was like, he's going to play. If it's a pain issue, Christian McCaffrey, he's maniacal. He's a little different. He's going to play. And hearing that it's a slight tear, maybe that's not as big of a deal, but just hearing the word tear, slight tear, it makes me feel like, man, that's the beginnings of something that could be a lot worse. And I know you're trying to win this week and you're trying to win every game you can if you're the 49ers, but if there's at all a risk of further injury, man, I just think that he's too valuable for what you need to do in January and hopefully February for the 49ers to put him in danger in an October game that I think the 49ers should be able to win without Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, and I think you said, if it's a full tear, does it have to be out longer? To me, what factors into that is the extent of it. Like I just referenced a few minutes ago, is it something that can go from a slight tear where it's pain management and you just hold him out for a week or two and then he's fully healed and he's good to go for the rest of the year, and at least his oblique won't be an issue. But if it's a full tear, does that mean more problems down the line? And now all of a sudden he has to miss much more time. Because I think most fans would tell you, well, you can probably win without the Vikings. Now, we say that. I saw the 49ers against Cleveland in different circumstances. Middle of the game, you have to try to pivot from whatever your game plan is, not having Christian McCaffrey, not having Deebo Samuel, and having a hampered Trent Williams, which, by the way, I don't know if you saw the Cleveland Browns today, but between them and the Colts scored 38 points on that defense, a defense that the 49ers kind of struggled with.
I wasn't raining, though.
But okay.
Hey, and the referees tried to bail out and they did bail out the Browns again. The Browns got something with the league this year. The league's actually trying to help the Browns out for all the years of losing. I don't know what's going on there. But
listen, man, you lost Nick Chubb. You don't have a quarterback. We'll let some stuff slide and help you and PJ Walker out.
I mean, it's a great point by you, Croc. Every week is so different, and there's no easy games in the NFL. A bad team can beat a good team, and the 49ers could lose. So you're going to be competitive. You're trying to win every single game, So it's not like, oh, we don't have to have Christian McCaffrey out there. You don't have to have Deebo. You don't have to have all your best players because this team's so bad. 49ers are so good. They're going to go beat everybody every week, no matter what. That's not the case in the NFL. And every game takes its own little detour through whatever kind of happenings in a game every single week. And it's always different. You replay a game 10 times, it's probably going to be very different every single one of those times. So you're not overlooking the Vikings. What you're doing, to me, if you're thinking about Christian McCaffrey, is saving him from himself and making sure he's healthy when you really, really need him, because I'd rather drop a seed in the playoffs and have McCaffrey playing in January than to get the 1 seed and not have Christian McCaffrey. That's the way I look at it. And and there's a lot of people like, oh, everyone's trying to play doctor today. Like you said at the beginning, we're not trying to play doctor here. I have no idea. I didn't, diagnose him. I'm not a doctor. The word tear worries me a little bit, but it's not black and white in the NFL, right? It's guesswork there too. And they're going to utilize Christian's ability to play through the pain, and the team doctors, their job is to make sure guys are ready to play and can play. And, if something's like completely broken, then it's like, okay, that's black and white. You're out this week because you need something to heal. But I think there's a lot of gray area, right? And so there's probably, I would love to hear what those conversations were about an injury like this. Christian McCaffrey says he can go, kind of would guess that that's what he's going to say, because that's how he's built and that's how he's wired. But do you have to save him from himself is what I would wonder a little bit with this injury. And I'm sure there's risk of re-injury. How much is the risk is something that they're weighing. So I think this is one of those injuries where there's probably some gray area there. It's not like, oh, the doctors gave him clearance because there's 0% chance he could get hurt worse, right? I don't think that's it. But I don't think they're putting him in such harm that they're like, oh my God, he's probably going to get jacked up. So we're still going to let him go out there and play. I think there's probably some give and take and some gray area, and pain threshold's a big part of that. And Christian McCaffrey, when it comes to pain, we're learning about Christian McCaffrey. He's not going to be a factor, I think, in him not playing.
You mentioned one thing about, saving a player from himself. And I think that's most NFL players. Everybody talks about the injury thing, and then sometimes they'll talk about teams not protecting the players. But I will say most guys want to be out there if they feel like they can go. So whether it's for monetization reasons, right, having different escalators in their contracts, or they just love playing the game of football. And Christian McCaffrey, to me, comes off as a guy who just really loves playing football. So I have a hard time thinking that if there's any way he can play in this game and they can minimize the pain, he'll be out there Monday night.
A good question from Tony. Do you remember last year Brock Purdy had like the oblique kind of rib injury, and he played, I think, on even a shortish week, right? And he played okay, but quarterbacks take a lot less contact than a running back does, so that's very different. And if Christian McCaffrey plays, I wonder if they're like, okay, well, we're not gonna have a McCaffrey heavy game plan because we don't want to overuse him in this game. But then we've talked about this a lot on the podcast, and it's kind of where Kyle Shanahan is. I would be shocked if Kyle Shanahan held him out of the game if McCaffrey said he could play. He'd be like, oh yeah, you're playing, and you're probably going to touch the ball every single time. So that's kind of what I expect to happen Monday.
Also, Brock Purdy, that game, he dealt with a great deal of pain. I think it affected him in that game as well. If you kind of go back, and there obviously were some good plays by him, but there were some plays that were a little bit more uncharacteristic of what we've seen, throughout the entirety of his time in the NFL for Brock. So how much did the pain affect him? How much would it affect a guy that is taking on a lot more contact from, consistently? If you're giving the guy 17 carries, I mean, that's 17 hits that he's taking, as opposed to a quarterback who I think the biggest pain he had to deal with was more so, kind of turning and throwing a certain way and, does stretch out that area. And we saw some passes kind of sail or some passes be off target. So different positions, high ankle sprain, that's another one, right? Trent is dealing with something. Sounds like did I see he's doubtful for this game? So to me, it sounds like Trent is kind of on the side of a high ankle sprain, because if it's just a regular ankle sprain, he wouldn't be doubtful heading to this game. But if let's say he's a quarterback with a high ankle sprain outside Jimmy Garoppolo, a lot of times they can kind of thug through that. Like they can kind of work through that. Okay, manage this pain. I don't have to move a whole lot. Maybe I just can't run as much. We've seen Patrick Mahomes. I feel like he deals with it every year and somehow he just kind of cruises through. But tackle, it's a little tougher. And if you go back a couple years ago when Trent Williams said he had to play in that postseason game against was it week? No, it was late in the postseason. He was saying he maybe should not have played because he kind of hurt the team.
It was the NFC Championship game.
Yeah, right. So he hurt the team more than he helped. He felt because he had an ankle injury. So those are the kind of the differences in the sense of like the pain where one player, while not 100%, we can get through this. The other player, man, I'm kind of hurting the team going through this. And I don't know if that's the case with Christian McCaffrey as opposed to Brock Purdy with playing with his oblique injury, but that is definitely something to keep in mind.
And part of it for Kyle is probably those compounding injuries too. It'd be a lot easier to keep McCaffrey out and make sure he's, not endangering himself if you have Trent, if you have Debo. So more on Debo, more on Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Dre Greenlaw, Isaiah Oliver, and the 49ers injury report, what we saw in week 7 Sunday. And we were going to get to some of your questions and, of course, keys to victory for the 49ers against the Minnesota Vikings on Monday Night Football next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors all season long have been teaming up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week. And whether you're prepping for the daily fantasy drafts or you are scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you with players that are guaranteed fits on your roster. So let's see who Vinny has picked out for us in this week's eBay Guaranteed Fit of the Week. And we're going to go to none other than the San Francisco 49ers offense, Croc, and George Kittle. 49ers tight end George Kittle had some ups and downs, some big plays, some big games. He's a red zone target for young Brock Purdy, but with the injuries on the 49ers offense, it really does feel like a George Kittle game, not only on Monday Night Football, but against the Cincinnati Bengals in week 8 as well. And sneaky high scoring potential there against Joe Burrow on the other side, with Kittle getting some targets with a chance for another massive afternoon, and especially that red zone production. And with Vinny Iyer from Locked On Fantasy Football helping us win our fantasy football championships, and eBay Motors knowing a thing or two about how much each player means to a football franchise and a championship fit and a perfect fit. It is the same with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs. My baby needed a fender flare. I went to eBay Motors. There was a green check mark. I knew exactly the part I needed, got it home. Couldn't have been simpler. Slapped it on my car and saved a whole bunch of money by going to eBay Motors and utilizing eBay's Guaranteed Fit. It's a no-brainer. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right. So the report on Deebo Samuel is that he has been declared out for Monday Night Football, and he will also stay out next week, week 8, against the Cincinnati Bengals, then have a week bye. So it's going to be a 3-week break for Deebo Samuel on a hairline fracture in his shoulder. So, and we're going to go to Dr. Nirav Pandya, who's a local Bay Area doc and does Bay Area radio and does a good job breaking down local injuries. He said the exact fracture location is key. It could be the humerus, clavicle, scapula, a lot of other things. He says big words that I'm not going to try to repeat. And whether it's near a joint or not. So in general, fracture healing takes 6 weeks, but can be shifted based on location and risk of further injury. Risk of further injury, a big talking point today for us, Croc. But it sounds like they're not going to put Deebo Samuel on IR, which means it's probably not going to be a 4 to 6 to 8 week injury for Deebo Samuel, or they don't expect it to be. So 3-4 weeks is where it's looking like for Deebo. He's going to be out for the next 3 weeks after the bye. Hopefully get Deebo back, but again, might not be a fully healed fracture according to the doc on this one, but definitely Deebo Samuel out this week. Trent Williams with the ankle injury is doubtful and did not get in any practices this week. And so I think that's got to be a factor if you're Kyle Shanahan. You're coming off a loss trying to win a football game, and you lost some pretty important pieces in that game. And if you don't have Trent Williams and you don't have Deebo Samuel, you probably don't want to just go sit Christian McCaffrey either if you have the opportunity to play him.
Definitely not. But, these are the things that teams deal with. And we knew at some point the 49ers would kind of face some injury concerns heading into a game. You have a terrific roster. You have a terrific defense. I think at this point is just, formulate a game plan, even if it's around Jordan Mason, Elijah Mitchell, and, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk. I feel like against a Vikings team, and not to kind of downplay who the Vikings are, especially when you're playing on the road, but you should be able to figure out a way to win that game if your coach is who he thinks he is, is your quarterback who you think your quarterback is, right? Like right now, I would say most 49er fans and a lot of people around the league, if you said straight up, would you take Brock Purdy or Kirk Cousins? And I think a lot of people would lean more towards Brock Purdy. So if that's the case, I understand losing a Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel is definitely not ideal. But with the playmakers the 49ers have, like you got all pro tight ends still out there. You got Brandon Ayuk who's having a career year to start this year. You have to figure out a way to still win that game with other guys that are legit contributors. I understand there's not a whole lot of passes to go around, but Kyle Juszczyk, we talk about him. He's a Pro Bowler every year. Jawan Jennings in the slot. They call him third and Jawan. Ray McLeod, he does something. Ronnie Bell, like, can he make a few plays? So you have all these guys that can really help you offensively, even though you're missing two of your better players. You still have a plethora of guys that most teams, they don't have that kind of luxury.
What do you think? Ronnie Bell, a.k.a. Diet Deebo from the chat?
For a guy that, I just see the Philadelphia Eagles, the uniforms they're wearing, kind of sweet. They went with the throwbacks, but take the over on everything with them. But with Ronnie Bell, watching him in the preseason and just how strong he played, and you saw the run after catch, and we highlighted in the offseason one of the things that we thought Kyle really liked, right? Like just that physicality, his willingness to block. I can definitely see a Diet Deebo. Now we're talking about diet because Deebo, on top of having probably 50 pounds on Ronnie Bell, his run after catch, just how explosive he is on some of those plays. We saw Ronnie Bell, nice run after catch. He gets tackled, he gets caught. Deebo doesn't get caught. So it is Diet Deebo.
And how many times in the last, how many years has it been? 5 years that every draft is like, next Deebo Samuel. This guy's the next Deebo Samuel. I've already seen it like 10 times in the upcoming 2024 draft. As it turns out, none of them are actually the next Deebo Samuel. So everyone's kind of their own thing, but Deebo's a different dude. Deebo's really unique, and so I want to see him back with the team and healthy. So that'll be fun in a few weeks. But they're going to be without that. So Christian McCaffrey gonna play. Is he going to carry a full workload? I want to see Jordan Mason. I'm with Richard here. He can hold it down for a little bit. I like Jordan Mason, man. He runs hard. I would probably even have Jordan Mason higher on the depth chart, even with a healthy Elijah Mitchell. I just haven't seen that burst from Mitchell recently, and he's been so hurt. I've loved what I've seen from Mason though. So anyway.
I feel like Elijah Mitchell, he hasn't gotten into that groove yet, and I think it takes a certain amount of carries for some people. I coached this kid, Jonah Coleman. He's killing it right now for Arizona. But to start the year, he's sharing the load with this Wiley kid because he's a senior and Jonah's a true sophomore. Wiley went down with a high ankle sprain. Jonah's like, okay, this is my time. He's getting all these carries. The last 2 games, he's had like over 350 yards combined for Arizona, like receiving and rushing, because they finally got him in a groove running the ball. And then you just see him continue to like just each game get better, each carry get better. And I think that's Elijah Mitchell as well. Like the more we see him carry the ball, he'll start to get in the groove. It's been so sporadic with his usage, and then he was hurt. we haven't seen him just have that consistent, like, all right, here's 15 carries. Like, what does it look like with Elijah Mitchell carrying the ball 15 times? Because I bet you he'd start to get into a groove that would be reminiscent of some of the, what he was kind of last year when he was healthy, what he was his rookie year when he ran for almost 1,000 yards while missing 6 games. It's just getting in that groove. I don't think he's really had that opportunity yet.
I think most running backs would tell you that they need to get in that groove, and they don't like sharing the backfield. They don't like going in and out of the game, and they need some carries. And the 49ers running game, even with McCaffrey, has been it's been not that much different than as far as like big play running game like it was going back to Raheem Mostert. It was like, and I think that's why the 49ers tried to get a little bigger up front and went to the 3rd round with a couple of bigger 230-pound running backs back-to-back years. I think the 49ers were trying to get better at being consistent in the running game and getting 4 yards of carry every time instead of like 2 yards, 1 yard, 20 yards. But that's that's the Kyle Shanahan zone scheme. It's just like it's kind of a big play running game where you're going to have, you're going to have some 3 and 4 and 5 yard runs too, but you're going to have some short runs and teams are trying to stop the run, but then you're going to break off a big run. It's just the way the 49ers offense is. And I'm sure every running back would prefer to have the opportunity to get stuffed a couple times and then break one. And for Elijah Mitchell, he's got so few carries this year. He hasn't really had a chance to find that groove. Croc, I want to talk a little bit more about week 7 and some of the stuff we saw Sunday, especially in the West. There's some weird scores out there. And then our biggest keys to victory here for Monday Night Football. We've talked a lot about this game, but what the Niners got to do to beat the Vikings Monday night next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Now is the time to snap into NFL action this season at FanDuel. America's #1 sports book is giving our listeners a special offer. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. Doesn't matter what happens on that first $5 bet. You can double your money or you can lose, and you still get $200 more to do with whatever you like on FanDuel, like bet spreads, player props, over-unders. I love the parlays. Give me the parlays. You bet a little, can potentially win a lot. I like that kind of action at FanDuel. And there's no better time to get in on that action than right now at America's #1 sportsbook. Tons of ways to bet on the NFL every single week. Tons of futures bets. Talking the NFL draft already on there. You can bet on the Super Bowl champion. Those odds are changing all the time. Every week there are lines if you want to go ahead of the current week 7 action as well. And plus we got Major League Baseball playoffs, NBA, NHL getting going as well. Snooker, cars, motorsports, combat sports, you name it. You can find it at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right. Taking a look at what happened in the NFC West, the Seattle Seahawks took care of business against the Cardinals, 20-10 win there. Seattle Seahawks now 4-2, Croc, and the Seahawks have had a bye already, so even if the 49ers lose, they'd still be ahead of the Seahawks, but it's looking like it's going to be a 2-horse race there, as obviously the Cardinals lost. They fall to 1-6. They're just undermanned this year. They're getting Kyler Murray back next week, but they lost by 10 to the Seahawks in Seattle. And we've seen a team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are suddenly 4-2, that looked just awful in week 1 against the 49ers. And obviously the 49ers have already beaten the Rams too. The Rams lost to those Steelers 24-17. The Rams falling below 500 now at 3-4. I don't know if the Seahawks scare you much either, Croc, but the Cardinals and Rams, I think, are going to wither because they're just they just have a lack of talent roster wide. Those two teams do.
I think the Seahawks and they play without a DK Metcalf today, but you see the running back, the kid out of Michigan State, started out Wake Forest. Yeah, there we go, Walker. Kenneth Walker, I think he's running the ball well. Geno Smith, he continues to be Geno Smith. I think the Geno Smith we see on a consistent basis might have or continue to have trouble against San Francisco 49ers. Just the style of football that the 49ers playing kind of maybe force him into doing some things that he doesn't really care for. But it took a lot to kind of win today. And Jake Bobo, the rookie out of UCLA, had a big time catch in the end zone. Had another crazy catch like on the sideline. But I feel like they don't really have enough. The thing that's probably carrying them the most right now is having Pete Carroll. And I think when can Pete Carroll take on the entire 49ers, especially if they're healthy, which Unfortunately for the Seahawks, you get the 49ers at the end of the year where that's when they're usually the hottest. I think the 49ers are primed to kind of win the NFC West right now, barring any type of crazy injury run.
It was Bobo and then Puka Nacua making crazy. Like Puka Nacua is kind of running away with the Rookie of the Year for a non-quarterback to win that award. This dude's legit. And after Cooper Kupp coming back, because I had Cooper Kupp in my league with Wink and some other guys that I play with. It's like my main league. I've tried to really cut down on how many fantasy football leagues I have right now. But I had Cooper Kupp drafted in the first round. He's hurt, so I picked up Puka Nacua. And I'm starting both of those dudes every single week. And it's kind of awesome that the Rams are going to be this team that's going to be throwing from behind with Matthew Stafford's not afraid to sling it, not afraid to put it up there and throw some interceptions. And so but Puka and Cooper Kupp are going to be startable players for me every single week in my fantasy league, which is kind of wild. And this dude's legit. Like, he's tough, goes up and gets the ball. Like what I'm seeing from some of these young players on both the Rams, actually on all three of those teams. Like those teams are all going to be better next year than they are right now.
Yeah, as long as the quarterback situation, continues to improve. That's the thing with Seattle. You kind of pigeonhole yourself into a more kind of bridge quarterback where, you kind of have to continue to pay him and you want to improve over Geno, but right now he's a very, solid, competent starting quarterback. That's tough for them trying to figure out how to move on and get a little bit better. Because if you just got a little bit better QB play from there, and he had a terrific season last year, but you can kind of see just what he is. If they got a little bit better QB play, they'd be in a much better position. As far as the Rams, though, how much longer will Stafford play? I think he looks like Stafford, but it's definitely a lot reliant on Puka Nacua. And I talked about Jake Bubble making the sideline catch. Puka had some as well. Strong runs, breaking tackles, run after catch. I was like, man, this kid right here. I actually mid-game put him in a little play on Underdog Fantasy, and he came through for me and got the catches that I needed. He's been a quality target for those guys, and I don't see that going away. He really kind of stepped into like that Robert Woods role, but it's kind of like Robert Woods on steroids with this team right now.
Yeah, 8 catches for 154 for Puka. And I think what we're talking about here, and you see it around the league, and it's easy to forget when you get mesmerized by athleticism and 40 times, and you see how pretty a guy is at the Senior Bowl winning on one-on-ones, but toughness is such a huge factor, and we see it with the 49ers wide receivers all the time. Like, toughness is huge for wide receivers in the NFL. So just remember that when we go through all of the evaluations and all the things that happen in the lead up to the NFL draft. Wide receiver is a sneaky, tough guy position in the NFL.
I talked about Jake Bobo. I mean, he ran almost a 5 flat. It was literally like 4.95 or something like that. Playing receiver at, coming out of UCLA. Puka Nacua, I don't know what his 40 time was, but I watched him at the Senior Bowl, and I will say he was sweet at the Senior Bowl. It was just like this fluid, he had suddenness. Matter of fact, he actually looks bigger right now than what it looked like at the Senior Bowl. I thought he was a little bit like kind of leaner, but right now you see him in his Rams uniform, and maybe it's the colors, I don't know, but he looks like he has a little bit more oomph to him, I guess you could say. And the way he's finishing off runs, he ran through one tackle, and it was clearly a business decision. Who was it that tried to tackle him? Was it? Gosh, I can't think of who. Someone tried to tackle him, and it was a business decision. How bad do I really want to tackle this guy? So that's kind of the fear that he's striking in opponents, and then the way that they utilize him to free him up. I can't wait to see the next time he plays the 49ers, him and Cooper Kupp. Because remember, Puka had a big 15 catches against the 49ers. He had 15 catches on like 20 targets. So you add Cooper Kupp to the mix, and just how they're able to utilize both those guys and get the ball in their hands. That can be something that's definitely challenging for opposing defenses.
I see CJ Stroud in the chat. I mean, it's a 2-horse race right now, CJ Stroud and Puka. Puka's got the better numbers because he's going crazy, but CJ Stroud's the quarterback, and he's doing some pretty great things. And actually, Puka, I love what D'Amico's got going on in Houston right now.
Puka leads the NFL in receptions, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he's going nuts. It's crazy what he's doing statistically right now, and we'll see if CJ Stroud starts throwing some more interceptions. He's got the first one on the board. Him and Brock got their first picks last week. CJ Stroud off this week. One more note here on the week 7 before we go to Croc. We'll give a couple of our keys to victory here to finish up. Ravens doing the 49ers a favor as far as NFC seeding. Thumped the heck out of the Detroit Lions, 38-6. Lamar went off on him on the ground, throwing 3 touchdown passes, 387 passing yards. Like this new offense for Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. His receivers didn't drop everything for him this week either. And I mean, they blew the Lions out of the water, man. That was unbelievable.
The Ravens is a sneaky good team. Nobody's really talking about, but like each week it's like they just kind of keep winning. So we'll see how that carries on. But for the Lions, that's a team that, prior to this game, you're talking about 5-1, and they're right in the thick of things with the 49ers, with the Philadelphia Eagles. Really, all 3 teams have the same record. And that blowout definitely wasn't something that I foresaw coming, especially with how Campbell, prepares all his guys. They're gritty. They play well. I think that Jared Goff, and I just complimented him on how well he has played and kind of dealt with this situation. He was sent to Detroit to die and kind of wither away as an NFL quarterback, or become like eventually like, yeah, you have a year here, but then you're going to be a long-term backup. And all he's done is be a pivotal part of turning things around there. Did not see the performance coming that we saw today, which really getting destroyed. And from the start, it was very clear that Detroit had no chance in this game. I got Lamar Jackson on my fantasy team, started him this week, and I could see like, man, okay, 1 touchdown, okay, run, 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns, and so
for next week.
What does that say about Detroit, who we feel like is one of those teams that has like a solid defense? They don't have a lot of superstars, right? Like 49ers, you look up and down this roster, offense, defense, it's loaded with just top 100 players, up and coming players. Who do we really like on the Lions? I mean, St. Brown, he's solid. Hutchinson, he start at edge on the 49ers opposite Nick Bosa. But outside of them, there's not a whole lot of who's who on that squad. But somehow they're figuring out a way to make it work. Did not work today. And I think that really helps the 49ers.
Got a Dave Craig comp for Jared Goff. I like that one a lot. Good call, Tony, in the chat. So this is a perfect example, Croc. Just some crazy scores on this Sunday. The Patriots knocking off the Bills, and the Bears with Tyson Bagent, undrafted quarterback, beating up on the Garoppolo-less Raiders that started Hoyer for some reason instead of their rookie quarterback. I don't know what the heck the Raiders
ain't no Connell.
Yeah.
Play in O'Connell. What do you do?
Yeah. What like I don't know what you could possibly be trying to do there, but it just goes to show.
Here's the thing, real quick. This is why you play Aiden O'Connell. Right now, you're really not going anywhere. And to me, it's becoming more and more apparent. Like Jimmy Garoppolo is not a long-term plan for you guys. You guys already signed him to a contract that wasn't long-term. So can we see if Aiden O'Connell could potentially be that guy? You started him 1 game earlier this year, and then you went back to Jimmy Garoppolo. Go back to Aiden O'Connell if Jimmy G is not out there, so you can at least see, is there a future with this guy? Because if you got a top pick, you're probably going to either take quarterback or build around the young guy. So it was kind of weird to go to Hoyer, who, we know who Hoyer is, figure out, McDaniel, if you're going to be around McDaniel, who's going to be your quarterback moving forward.
Yeah, and finally, Hoyer ends up getting benched, and you bring O'Connell in anyway, who ends up playing better, at least throws a touchdown pass. And so he threw a touchdown, which Hoyer didn't, threw half as many interceptions. He threw 1, Hoyer threw 2 in that game. So I don't know how Raiders fans would lose their minds, I think, if you see Hoyer ever again, this year or beyond, playing quarterback for you. You got to play Aiden O'Connell, but I think Jimmy's coming back next week. But it just goes to show you that anything can happen in the NFL. The Broncos won again. They look like the most lost team in the NFL this year. They beat the Packers 19-17. So for the 49ers, Monday night, you can't overlook anybody. And the Minnesota Vikings, while they only have 2 wins on the year and they're not playing great football, and they lost their best player in Justin Jefferson, is not going to be playing against the 49ers. The Niners are missing some guys too. So you can't overlook them. Croc, what's that biggest key for you so the 49ers don't overlook the Vikings and win Monday night?
I think it's figure out a way to contain Danielle Hunter. This is a guy right now who's tied for the league lead in sacks, at least heading into this week. He's a guy that can, disrupt the game. If we saw anything last week that looked, problematic, it was how Brock Purdy was never able to get into a groove, never able to get into a rhythm, was never comfortable back there, sacked several times, throwing the ball maybe before he wanted to. I understand the elements, but, off target passes. a guy like Danielle Hunter can make it to where, like, that kind of keeps up for Brock Purdy and the 49ers. So I would say, if you got to chip Danielle Hunter, if you have to, maybe leave a tight end to block him on certain plays, make it to where he is not a problem. So put a lot of resources and attention towards Danielle Hunter so he doesn't really mess the game up.
I got a quick stat for you here, Croc. And, with offensive linemen and with cornerbacks, especially when you don't hear their name a lot, it's usually a good sign. We have hardly at all talked about Charvarius Ward. He's almost never mentioned on the telecasts. Charvarius Ward, this is from Pro Football Focus. Charvarius Ward through the first 6 games of the season on 20-yard plus targets, 1 reception allowed, 1 interception, 1 forced incompletion, and a 3.0 passer rating allowed on those plays when he's targeted down the field, and a 90.8 coverage grade according to Pro Football Focus. Dude's playing. So I think the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan this week really emphasized how disappointed he was in the run fits, and kind of talked about how they were not good enough against the run against the Browns last week. The tackles are really good for the Vikings. By the way, I've seen some people ask me about Brian O'Neill as far as a trade target. They're not trading their tackles. Darisaw, O'Neill, they got a really good bookend of tackles. So it might be hard for those guys on the edge to get to Kirk Cousins a lot in this game, but they don't run the ball well at all. Madison's pedestrian. They brought in Cam Akers, who's sub-pedestrian level. Madison can catch the ball a little bit out of the backfield, but he's not dynamic after the catch either. So I'm not worried about it. I think they're going to be primed to stop the run. So guys like Ward, guys like Diamador Lenore and Isaiah Oliver, who's limited in practice this week, but got in a full session. Looks like he's not even on the injury report anymore coming into this game. You got to cover him because Kirk Cousins is going to probably be thrown from behind a little bit, and he's gonna let it fly. And there's no Justin Jefferson, but I think that's where the Vikings have shined offensively is in the passing game. So I'm looking at the coverage guys. I'm looking at the pass rush. Can you get home against those good tackles and pressure Kirk Cousins and stay covered up on the back end? That's my biggest key to victory here in this one.
Yeah, definitely. Kirk Cousins, never want to see him get in the groove, but I think without, Justin Jefferson, I think it'd kind of be tough sledding for him a little bit. 49ers, one thing they do is they do a terrific job of just doing their job. You talked about Charvarius Ward and the one catch that he gave up downfield. I believe that was last week against Amari Cooper down the right sideline. So you don't want to see any of that, but I'm not sure how much the Vikings receivers threaten them. Jordan Addison, rookie out of USC, he's a guy that still is kind of struggling to kind of get going. Talked about the Lions, not a whole lot of oomph with the players that they have. I did forget to mention guys like Sam Laporta and Gibbs, but you look at Jordan Addison, that's a young guy right there who, unlike the Lions young guys, Addison is struggling a little bit to kind of get going and have like an impact. Had 1 touchdown last week, I believe, but the production as far as like catches and stuff, we talked about Puka Nacua, who had 15 in one game. I'd be surprised if Addison has 15 on the season.
Dre Greenlaw is questionable. I saw that in the chat. He's got in some limited sessions, didn't practice to start the week. He got 2 limited practices in. He's dealing with a hamstring. So we'll see if Dre Greenlaw plays. That'll help against the 49ers with the 49ers run defense. Aaron Banks looks like he's good to go at left guard. He had an ankle injury, got into full practice Saturday as well. As Isaiah Oliver that I mentioned a little bit earlier. So, I think this is a winnable game for the 49ers, even if they're without McCaffrey, even if they're without Debo, even if they're without Trent Williams. I do expect McCaffrey to play, but the 49ers are a better football team, and they got smacked in the mouth last week, and I don't think they're going to have it this week. And how about this last note for a key to victory? I'm predicting a big Brock Purdy bounce back as well on the turf. I think this is going to be a Kittle game potentially in the red zone, maybe an Ayuk game as well, because look at this little nugget. Shout out to Al Sacco on Twitter. Vikings are 0-3 at home this season, and opposing quarterbacks who were Baker Mayfield, Justin Herbert, and Patrick Mahomes. Some good quarterbacks there. Mayfield, whatever you think about him, but Herbert and Mahomes can sling it. Those quarterbacks have gone 92 of 122, which is 75% completion, 860 yards, 8 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions. And so for the season, Minnesota, whoever they're playing against, wherever they're playing, has allowed about the same, 75% completion, second worst in the league coming into this week, and a 103.3 passer rating. So even without Christian McCaffrey, I think the 49ers could probably run the ball a little bit with Mason, a little play action, and put the game in Brock Purdy's hands. And I'm not down on Purdy at all after last week. I think he'll bounce back and have a big one in week 7 on Monday Night Football. Prime time. He's all about it. Purdy's a primetime guy. So is Kittle, actually.
Yep. Much better conditions as well. Being indoors, probably the worst thing the 49ers have to deal with being in Minnesota is the skull chant. And I'm not going to lie, I contemplated flying to Minnesota, going to this game just so I can witness the skull chant live in person.
All right, we see some trade talk in the chat. We'll get to that next week when we have more time, when we're not breaking games down and doing post-game stuff. We'll be here with you after Monday Night Football live, breaking it all down. Appreciate all the everydayers. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. We appreciate you. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. And Croc and I will be back Monday night post-game right here, Locked On 49ers.